justice.
No peace.
That's what I want. What do we want?
Justice.
What do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
Thank you very much. So we're going to go ahead and get started this meeting. Absolutely. So here to my right, Mr. Sam Riddle. Mr. Sam Riddle is a staple in the community. Gentleman has been kind enough to help me do some of the things that I've done here in this organization. He's been there for me whenever I've needed. Know about the show. Gentleman is now currently running for the 12th district. 13th district. We're in the 12th now. They moved us around.
No, we have a 13th district. I just wanted in here.
Yeah, me too. They moved us around. So,
Okay.
He's gonna be here for us.
Appreciate you, Will.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you. And as Will said, you know, when I first met the Reverend Al Sharpton, it was in 1992. My client then was the former governor of California, Jerry Brown. We were in front of the Apollo Theater, and Reverend Sharpton marched around the corner. Then, he was kind of a short, pudgy guy, had a shaky sweatsuit on, and you look at him now, and he's thin and well-tailored now. So we all watch one another's growth pattern. But even then, National Action Network meeting, and you are at a National Action Network meeting. And the folks here from Detroit and the Michigan chapter of the National Action Network know how we open up our meetings, as does Brother Will. No justice!
No peace.
No justice!
No peace.
No justice!
No peace.
And when we say that, we mean it. When we witness these racist, white supremacist, killer cops executing us at will on the streets of America, we resist by any means necessary. And when you see the chief of police in Grand Rapids play a body cam video, that's you that pushed the play button. It wasn't the chief of police. It was the action of the streets, the organizing in the streets that pushed the play button. When you see the prosecutor over there in the Grand Rapids area charge the cop with second-degree murder, it's you and what we do in the streets that motivates the charge. But remember, that's the same area that just acquitted known Yahoo reactionaries that would have killed if they had their way our governor. So the jury pool over in that area is a little shaky and infested in their DNA with a level of racism that we still have to address. Just because the charge is issued does not mean a conviction is forthcoming, and we have so much work to do, and so much of it centers around what happens in places like this, not only in Michigan, but around the nation, where we breathe life into a democracy that the Trumpites, white nationalists, and white supremacists would like to snuff out with voter suppression. It's very real, it's very alive in a Republican-dominated legislature in Michigan. That's why I'm so glad that we have the black woman that used to be Gretchen Whitmer's leader when she became the first black woman to serve as floor leader in the history of the Michigan legislature, and now represents more black voters than any other black elected person holding elective office, because she's city councilwoman at large, Mary Waters. Mary, just wave your hand back there. And you know, for what it's worth, the pollster said Mary couldn't win. But her title today is City Councilwoman at Large, Mary Waters. We have another person, a Detroit elected official in the room that catches her share of heck too, but she's standing up because she understands the nature of politics is all local. And she's positioned to shock the world too, and that would be the Detroit City Clerk, Janice Winfrey. See, when I look around the room, I see so many people. I see a minister here. She told me, well, Sam, you know, I listen to your radio show. My children, they like you, but you cuss a little too much for me. You just cuss a little too much for me. But you know, we're working on it. Some of us are in need of prayer every day. Every day. So I just appreciate that prayer that you'll send up. But today, we also have with us, I know I missed someone else running for office, as a guy with UAW credentials. That,
Sam, how you doing?
yeah, there he is over there. Yeah. UAW credentials running for state rep. Who else is running for office? Okay, yeah, we give him an opportunity to speak. I just wanted to say hi to him because I mentioned Janice. And of course, this is not a political meeting, right? Right. But everybody know how to spell Nessel, don't they? When you come in the door, you know how to spell Nessel, and I've had the Attorney General on the show more than once, and just a hearty welcome to Attorney General Dana Nessel. And here what we'll be doing is the pastor and I will be advancing questions to Attorney General, and we want to hear from you most of all, not us, but from you, what questions you may have of Attorney General Dana Nessel. Attorney General, welcome.
Thank you.
And Pastor, would you like to say a word of welcome or anything?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Hang on one second. Everybody, I want to give everybody, folks, there's going to be folks here who are part of organizations and looking for elective office. If you would be so kind, if you are, to just stand up, mention what it is that you are trying to do so everybody can get a feel for what kind of room that we have today.
Janice Winfrey running for Congress in Michigan 12. That's the new congressional district of which you are a part of right now. Thank you.
I don't need the mic.
Okay.
Trustee Edwards Wheeler, Wayne County Community College District, running for my second term. I'll be running in the general election. Thank you.
Hello? Can you hear me? My name is Jim Reed. I'm founder of the National Inkster Network, Inkster chapter. Today, if this is the appropriate time to make a comment with regards to an issue, is this the right time? Oh, okay.
Well, I can guarantee you Jim has a comment. I guarantee you that.
Okay. And last but not least, by any means, this is
So good evening, everyone. I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to the great city of Inkster, where we have lots of our leaders in the room, not just me. I'm Velma Jean Oberman, running for State Senate District 5. But as I sit in the room, we have the chair of our Inkster Dems, Mr. Byron Nolan, and I know Connie's in here as well. We have our leaders here from NAN, from the Dems, from the task force, from Christians in Action. So welcome to our powerful city.
Stephen Chisholm, the 26th District for State Representative.
And the AG like to stand up, but I do want to introduce the state of Michigan's 54th Attorney General, Ms. Dana. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Well, thanks everybody. It's great to be here, and as always, Sam is an inspiration and always very interesting, no matter what he is saying. And you know, I appreciate him having me on his show as many times as he did in 2018. When I was very much an underdog and very much not expected to come out of the endorsement convention, let alone go on and win against the sitting Speaker of the House. But he gave me a chance, and he let me have my say, and I really appreciate that. So thank you, Sam. And thanks for everybody to be, for allowing me to come here tonight. It's really important to me that folks in Inkster are properly represented in terms of our state government working on their behalf. Everybody thinks the city of Detroit, or everybody thinks the city of Flint, or everybody thinks of other major cities. And I always see Inkster get the short end of the stick. And that's why I really wanted to make it my focus for cities like Inkster. And I know that we're doing an expungement fair here coming up specifically for Inkster residents. and we have a lot of other activities that we have in the works. But I want to talk a little bit. Let me start with this. Let me start with basically what the Department of Attorney General does. Because the problem that I have is that we can do all kinds of great things for people in our state, but it doesn't really matter what we're doing if you guys don't know about it and can't take advantage of it. Like, that's what you pay your taxes for. But if you don't know that certain programs exist, then you're not being helped by those programs, right? So, firstly, the Attorney General, we represent state actors and state government. So we represent the governor and the Secretary of State when they get sued, or give them legal advice when they need it. We represent all the agencies, Department of Health and Human Services, Michigan Department of Corrections, the DNR, the Michigan Department of Transportation, list goes on and on and on. And we represent the state commissions, like the State Board of Canvassers and commissions like that. But we don't just represent the state of Michigan, we also represent the people of the state of Michigan. And so that's the proactive work we do. And that's sort of the legacy, if you remember the late great Frank Kelly for the 927 years that he was the Attorney General of the state. And what he did is he created a civil rights division. He created a consumer protection division. He created a public integrity division to root out corruption. So, you know, it's my perspective, it's not just that you represent the state and defend the state, you also have to represent the people who live in this state. And that's what we really try to put an emphasis on at the department. I want to talk a little bit, starting with some of the work that I've done that's very different from the guy who I replaced, the guy by the name of Bill Schuette, that I made no secret of not being a big fan of. It's weird, right? I live in Wayne County. I worked for Wayne County. I've been here for many, many, many years. And when I go to Lansing, I just don't, when I first went up there and walked into the AG's office, it didn't look very much like Wayne County to me. And here's what I mean by that. When I walk into, you know, KMAC, or walk into Frank Murphy, or I walk into a number of our buildings that I normally used to do work in as an attorney in Detroit, you have representation from all walks of life, right? You have people of every race, every religion, every ethnicity, every national origin. And then when I got to the Williams building in, you know, which is the primary office for the Department of Attorney General, I mean, there were basically like two kinds of people that worked there. There was your straight, white, Christian dude who wore a straight tie, a long tie, and then you had your straight, white, Christian dude that wore a bow tie. And like, that was basically the diversity that was reflected in that office. And it was weird to me. And so one of the things I knew that we had to do right away was change that. And frankly, I sought to bring a little bit of Wayne County to the Department of Attorney General, and we've done that. We've done that, and we have a number of people. My Solicitor General is an immigrant woman from Lebanon, first Arab American in the history of the nation to be a state Solicitor General and to win a case before the United States Supreme Court. My Chief of Operations, a woman named Venetia Cizelle, she's, you know, the first African American woman to ever hold that position. She's also an immigrant from Haiti. She just finally got her citizenship a couple years ago, which we unfortunately couldn't celebrate because of COVID at the courthouse. But I mean, we just have a variety. My Chief of Investigations is a former DPD cop by the name of Aubrey Sargent, who has I've worked in the city of Detroit his whole career before coming to work for me. We just have changed the office by making certain that we have representation of all people who live in our state. And it's not just a matter, I'm not talking about some kind of tokenism where it's like, oh great, now we can show off that we have people who look different. I mean, these are people who have experiences that they can bring to the office so that we can better understand the communities that they come from, so we can better represent those communities around the state, and it's important. I mean, it matters. So some of the things that we did just walking in, and these are things, Sam, that I promised when I talked to your listeners on your show. For instance, one of the very first cases we tackled was the right to literacy case, you might remember. And it was this case where, you know, the emergency manager of the state had taken over the Detroit public school system and basically, you know, had kids warehoused in these schools where, you know, might be that there was no heat, might be that there was, you know, rodents in the corner of their classroom, didn't have books or had out and write and to do mathematics. Like, you're not supposed to warehouse us, you have to teach us stuff as well. We have the right to be educated, just like anybody else. And even though that was a case that was filed against the Board of Education and against Governor Snyder, and it was against the state, I built a conflict wall so that, you know, the state can still be defended, but I took the other position. I took the position of the plaintiffs. And I said there is a constitutional right for children in our state to be taught to read and write. That is a fundamental right. And you know what? In the Sixth Circuit, before the three-judge panel, we won. We won that case. Now, what ended up happening was, as a result of winning that case, the state settled, and unfortunately, the full court, en banc at the Sixth Circuit, that means all of the judges, vacated the decision by the three-judge panel, which is unfortunate because we now can't use it as precedent. But I thought it was important that at long last we have an attorney general that stood up for kids in the state that were being denied an education. We had, obviously, the Flint cases, right? The civil cases, hundreds of cases that were filed by residents of the city of Flint that had been poisoned by their own government. And I came into office and said, I'm going to be settling those cases. I'm no longer going to fight the people of Flint. I'm going to work with their attorneys to resolve this case. And the governor and I sat down and we hammered out an agreement. It was the largest settlement in the history of the state of Michigan. But we settled it. And on the criminal case, I signed those to, you know, Prosecutor Kim Worthy said that she would come on and assist. And I had her working with my Solicitor General, and they got in there. They saw that there was what they believed to be a sham of an investigation that was more targeted towards Bill Schuette getting elected to governor than it was holding people accountable. And they reviewed millions and millions of pages of documents that had never ever been obtained by the person that Schuette had working on it. And they ended up charging 9 people, including the former governor. And those cases remain pending, and they've been fighting it out in court. And yes, they're dragging on for a long time, and I wish they wouldn't, but we had COVID and also our court system. And, you know, but they're trying to hold people accountable for having committed crimes against the residents of Flint. We have so many other things that we're doing. We created the nation's first state attorney general hate crimes and domestic terrorism unit. And so you know what I do? I've been putting away Nazis and white supremacists. So what we've been doing is it's not just that we go after anyone who threatens government officials, but we also try to be proactive in that when we find organizations, for instance, we just got 4 convictions on an organization called The Base. The Base is the English translation of Al-Qaeda. And, you know, they were training up in the thumb in Tuscola County, and they had all kinds of weapons and firearms, and, you know, were trying to put together explosives, and they had on their minds mass destruction, and they were going to target minority communities. And if you think that one 18-year-old in Texas who can take out 21 people in a very short period of time, think what you can do when you have a whole organization where they have not 1 firearm, not 2 firearms, but dozens and dozens of firearms, and they've been training together just in an effort to try to take out as many people as possible But we prosecuted them under a law that's never been prosecuted, not just in Michigan, but in any state in America. And it's an old law that's called training with firearms for the purposes of causing, creating an insurrection or for, in order to harm people or property. And now they're in prison. And they didn't hurt anybody. Except for their family members who I think are deeply ashamed of them. But, I mean, this is saving lives. I know it's not sexy when they have, I would rather prosecute people for that than prosecute them for homicides that they commit later. And so we are being very aggressive and tenacious. And when somebody, whether somebody's threatening the governor, whether somebody's threatening, Senator Stabenow, or whether somebody's getting threatened whether it's Cynthia Johnson, who was a state rep who got threatened, or Sarah Anthony, who's a state rep who got threatened, to public health officials, to school board members who are being threatened, we take those cases very seriously and we prosecute them. And we've done it over and over and over dozens of times. And I've said this, when you sign up to run for public office, look, you might sign up for a lot, right? And you expect that a whole lot of people might be kind of angry with you, and you expect that people might give you a piece of their mind here and there and disagree with your policies and your positions, but you don't sign up to get death threats. You don't sign up to have yourself and your family members targeted for murder. That is unacceptable, and it should not be the norm. You don't want people who are being threatened and don't feel like they can do their jobs properly, and you don't want good people being kept out of government because they're too afraid to run for public office because they don't want to die and they don't want their families to die either. And so we have been very, very aggressive in pursuing those cases. I'm getting a 5-minute sign. But do you already, I can start answering questions about time.
Okay, and Will, when we hear this Attorney General with this level of energy, just a historical perspective, you mentioned Frank Kelly, the Consumer Protection Division. He got that from the former president of the National District Attorneys Association, Bob Leonard, over in Genesee County. I once had the dubious honor of sitting in the back seat, riding as Frank Kelly drove. Bob Leonard was in the front seat. I worked in trinomial cases in Genesee County, was in the back seat. He never did under 120 miles to Black Lake an hour, 120 miles an hour.
Yeah,
and he took care of business though. And go on.
You're a braver soul than I, because I saw him drive a few years before he passed. And let me tell you, I don't think he didn't improve with age.
No. And also, people, just for your benefit, I still represent the family of Isaiah Shows. Isaiah Shows was the only black student killed during Columbine to really set the standard for crazy-ass killers when it comes to school shootings. And I still represent that family some 23 years later. The last words Isaiah Shows heard before they blew his heart out was, "Where is that little nigga?" In the meetings I had one-on-one with President Clinton and First Lady Hillary Clinton, later on with U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno, we could not at that time get them to declare Columbine a hate crime. Look at Grand Rapids. White folks with the FBI, state authorities, local authorities, rushing to call what happened in, Buffalo a hate crime. I'm talking about Buffalo. 10 black folks murdered in Buffalo on the basis of race. So in some ways, we've made some progress, but some of the greatest progress is what I just heard this Attorney General say, when they move ahead of time, before the funerals, before the memorials. And that is so critical, that stage and intervention, because believe me when I tell you this, all threats must be taken seriously. Those Columbine killers, Klebold and Harris, had stood in front of the Shows house wearing their trench coats. Filmmaker Michael Moore and I worked on a film on the Academy Award called Bowling for Columbine. But when we have an Attorney General willing to proactively intervene before the murders occur, that's what we need more of. Will, you want to handle it with the questions now?
I actually want to start off with, just to piggyback on what you just said and some of the things I'm involved with the NAACP. You're saying being proactive. What kind of systems can be put in place around police policing and the threats that are made to students in schools? When is it enough that they should begin to do something?
All right, well, what kind of threats are you talking about specifically?
We're talking hate. It was an actual hate.
By other students?
By another student, where
Okay.
students were said that we're going to take advantage of a certain group of people.
Right.
And the police said that they had a rubric that they used, and we don't know how old it was or whatever, but we really need to have an understanding as to who put these systems in place for our protection, for the parents as well as the students.
Right, well, firstly, we have, just so you know, for our hate crimes unit, you can make a complaint directly to us without going through local law enforcement if you feel more comfortable dealing with us directly. And so you can go online and do that, and we investigate every single solitary complaint of hate crime. Now, let's understand what a hate crime is. A hate crime, as it's defined by the Ethnic Intimidation Act, means that there has to be some sort of either an assault or damage to person or property, and then while that is occurring, or the motivation for it has to be either racial bias, gender bias, national origin bias, etc. So you are committing what would otherwise be an assault and battery, or would otherwise be malicious destruction of property, but your motivation is because it's hateful in nature, right? And that's the thing that we know about, hate crimes, by the way. Hate crimes don't just target that one individual. They're really designed to target an entire community. You're not just trying to hurt that person. You're trying to hurt everybody in that community and to scare people into submission. So you can make a report directly to our department and we investigate that. But in terms of what happens at school, first of all, just because you're in a school environment doesn't insulate you. Like, you can't say, well, if you were out, outside of the school, if you did or said the same thing, you could be prosecuted, but now you can't because you're in school. We can't control how the school handles it in terms of suspension or expulsion, but we can handle it in terms of whether or not it's a crime in the first place. But the school district gets to decide what happens to that student as to whether or not they are expelled or suspended or what have you. Now, I will say this. We have been working on, this is a little bit off topic, but we've been working really hard on the school to prison pipeline in my department. And what we've been doing is we've been working with school districts around the state to tell them that they don't, it's not a choice. It's the law that they have to work with restorative practices in the schools. And what that means is when you have kids that have emotional issues, people are suffering. They are really suffering right now. So you have kids acting out. What we were finding is that most of the kids getting expelled, most of the kids getting suspended were children of color. They were students of color, and it was disproportionate. The other problem that we had was that, by and large, most of the teachers, most of the educators were white, and they far outpaced the number of children that were black and brown. And because they did not have inherent bias training, there was a lot of miscommunication. Let me give you an example, all right? That I know everybody will know what I'm talking about. The very first time I went to talk at a black church, I was like, why is everyone yelling at me? Because, we're at my synagogue, like, everybody's very, very quiet, and they only speak when the rabbi tells you to speak. So I wasn't used to people interacting with me in that way. I'm sorry, I just wasn't. That was how I grew up, and it was very different. So what I was seeing, for instance, in schools, you'd have kids that were being suspended or being kicked out of the class for interrupting. Well, they weren't trying to interrupt, they were participating. But because the white teachers weren't used to that, it was a problem. And so those are the kinds of things that, like, you don't necessarily have somebody who in their head is like, I'm discriminating against this black child. You don't know what you don't know, right? So anyway, the restorative practices kind of work that we've been doing is to make sure that, I'm not talking about kids threatening other kids racially, which is a whole different topic. I mean kids who are having issues and they need help. So, and what doesn't help them? Getting kicked out of school. Because now they have no future at all. And so that's one of the things that we've been working really, really hard on to make sure that fewer kids are getting kicked out of school and are able to continue with their education. But if I could just move on to that, what you specifically addressed, I think it's important also. We've seen incidences. I did a town hall in Bloomfield Hills where there were racial attacks against students of color. We just had, where I live in Plymouth, and in the Plymouth Canton Community Schools, this horrible, horrible video that was disseminated, and that's the kind of thing that, we have to make sure that students in their school feel protected and feel safe, and that is especially true for students of color who experience that kind of animosity and hatred at a level that it's very different for other students. And so, I can just tell you that we have been in touch with all of these school districts, and we are trying our hardest to make sure that any incidences that are not followed up on by local police, that those reports go to our department for us to investigate.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to open this up for the floor to ask questions of the Attorney General. If you don't want to ask the question directly, we do have paper and notepads around, so if you want that question asked in your stead, we can do that as well. Okay, I'm gonna start right here because I'm right here, and then I'm going to start moving around the room here.
I would just ask you to piggyback on the two questions that I asked you earlier, because there are so many seniors in here, they're being affected the most by it. If you can tell them the process on what to do, on how to make it stop. Those are those Medicare telemarketing calls that all y'all get.
Yeah. So
then the second thing is, a lot of us live next to a house that's owned by a private company that won't do anything. Tell us what we have to do to get a resolution to that.
Well, first of all, as I sort of alluded to earlier, we can't solve a complaint that we don't know about. Now, every year we get, we work on over 10,000 consumer protection complaints, and you would be surprised at, you have a business that is, scamming people. It could be, somebody who says, oh yeah, I'll mow your lawn, and I'm going to, shovel your driveway if you pay in advance, and then they never show up. All the way up to a company like, Ford, or, a multinational corporation. You make a complaint to us, we do our best to see if we can resolve those complaints. Now, we can't resolve every complaint, large part because there is this ruling from the 1990s that I'm challenging right now. Right now, I am suing Eli Lilly over the exorbitant cost of insulin. And we are trying to overturn a terrible opinion from, you remember Cliff Taylor when he was on the court? It was when Justice Taylor was on the court, it was a terrible opinion that really limited the ability of the Attorney General to sue companies under the Consumer Protection Act. And we're challenging that ruling, and I'm really hopeful that we'll be successful. But we work as hard as we can to help consumers when they have been wronged by whoever, business or what have you. But you gotta file a complaint with our office, and we do respond. And sometimes all it takes, there's a lady who I saw at the MDP convention and endorsement convention back in April, and she came up to me and she said, hey, I bought a lemon from Ford, and the dealership wouldn't give me any relief. And 2 weeks later, I couldn't get the car to start, had all kinds of issues, a brand new car. And dealing with Ford got her nowhere, dealing with the dealership got her nowhere. It took only one letter from your friendly Department of Attorney General, and she got all her money back. So this is what I'm saying, but we can't help you if we don't know about it. So you have to go to our website. Please peruse the website and see all the things we do. Just a few other things I want to tell you about. We have something I put in place a few years ago called the Michigan Identity Theft Support System. If you or someone you love or know about has been scammed, yes, we can absolutely, you report that to us. We're going to try to find out who scammed you and try to get your money back. But we go one step further, and this. We assign you a caseworker to help you restore your good name. Because sometimes the worst thing that you lose is your identity. And even if it's not maybe the $200 you lost, it's the fact that now all your information is floating around in the dark web, and you never know at what time somebody's going to take out a loan in your name or get a line of credit in your name. And so that's what we help you do, and we don't just like send you to a website and say, look here. We have somebody walk you through the entire process, assigned to your case walks you through from beginning to end. So we provide those kinds of services, and let me just mention a couple of things. It's not part of the question, but I just want to get this out. Expungements. If you or somebody you know needs an expungement, we're there to help. So not only on our website, there's about 1 million people in the state that are eligible now because of new laws that were passed a few years ago. Not only on our website do we walk you through, and we have every single form on there, but we also conduct expungement fairs all around the state of Michigan, one here in Inkster coming up, another one that's sponsored by the Wayne County Sheriff's Department that we are going to be participating in that's coming up. And you show up, we have lawyers there that are going to assist you in the entire process. I'm also working with the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson. We have something called the Road to Restoration. There are 300,000 people in the state of Michigan that are eligible to get their driver's license restored, who have been revoked or suspended for many years, that are now eligible. So we are going all over the state, Jocelyn Benson and I, and restoring people's driver's licenses. We got about 150,000 people that are eligible right away. Like, you come to one of those fairs, you might sit there for an hour or two, but when you leave, you're going to have a driver's license. The other 150,000 people are going to have to go through hearings at the department, and we try to help people navigate that process. But a lot of people think that when you're revoked, that's it, you're done. Not necessarily. And we provide that information to say, yeah, you're eligible. Here are the things that you have to do, or you just go through to our fair. We have people pre-register because we don't want to waste people's time. And we try to slot it, like you have a 1 o'clock appointment, 2 o'clock appointment, so you're not just sitting there all day. But these are just things that we now provide because I like to think that we are a much more consumer and more people-friendly government than we were under the previous administration. And that goes for the Secretary and the Governor as well. And we are trying our hardest to bring government to the people and be a government that serves the people instead of a government that persecutes the people, which is unfortunately what I've come to see. But I'm sorry, that was a lot. I said a whole bunch of things that weren't relevant. I just wanted to get some of that out.
That's all right. And just real quick, I know your staff here, but instead of going to the internet, I want to know what's going to be the best phone number. The phone is in your pocket if I can get it, or numbers so that people can reach out to you.
Kim, do you have that information for everybody?
Hello.
We got to bring cards back because usually we have our cards, and it's got all of the different numbers for everything that you can need, and all the different website addresses. Because, like I said, there are a lot of services that we provide, but they ain't helping if you don't know about it. We'll get out of it. Why don't you continue, and we'll make sure that we have all that. And also, can we bring up the staff?
Hello. I'm glad to see you here and all the information you're giving. My name is Gabe Henderson. One of the biggest detriment to our city of Inkster and all that, closing down our public schools, our district and all that. And it's caused such a hardship upon us, especially our young children. I work with help Ms. Crystal Linton with the We Rise program on Mondays and Wednesdays. And seeing them young kids and all that, a lot of them are sleepy and all that. They have to get up early in the morning to catch a bus for 5 o'clock. And then when they get to the school, but I'm gonna call it Adolf Schneider. He was the governor at that time. It was all, because he was close, and he could have fought. We was in a little debt. Inkster never had a whole lot of money and all that. We spent money to try to fix up the schools, and made it presentable and all that. We always struggled, got a little debt and all that. And they want to look at that. And I know other school districts in the wealthiest neighborhood was in more debt than the city of Inkster. But hey, it was easy to close down, and that was a sin. When a person is wounded, you don't put salt in their wounds. But every time it seems like something happened in Inkster and all, we have a problem, everyone puts salt in our wounds. Especially Republican, that Republican, they don't start that. But anyway, we need some help to reestablish. I hear billions of dollars are supposed to come to communities to help some of the things that were done wrong to the communities and all that. No, these billions of dollars, we need our share of the billions of dollars to get our school system back. So our kids go ahead and get up early in the morning, catching a bus, and then they go to some of the other districts and all that, and they not handle, fairly and properly. So we need our school districts. So we need some help. Okay.
So I understand exactly what you're saying. I will say this. that I agree with you. I mean, we definitely need way more money into the public schools. There's no question about it. And it's so short-sighted when we starve our public school system because we end up paying, if we don't pay for it on the front end, we pay for it on the back end, don't we? And we rob children of their futures, which is about the worst thing that you can do as a government. Here's what I'm going to say about that situation. We have a very, very, very pro-education governor in office right now. And that's why the teachers love Governor Whitmer, and that's why people who are deeply vested in the educational community love her. What we don't have is a very friendly state House or state Senate, which are run by Republicans. Now, what do you think Republicans think? I'll see who can give me the answer to this. What do you guys think the Republicans believe is the biggest problem with the school system in our state? Sam?
Fraud.
No, it's 3 letters. Critical race theory.
All right.
That's what they're focused on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not kidding you. They're not having hearings. They're not having, that's true, that's that. All right, it's the acronym, you're right. That's why Sam didn't get it, you're right. I misstated that. But my point is, these are people who, like, make up a problem that is used to racially divide us, and then they have hearing after hearing after hearing. I don't know if you saw, but when they started talking about it in the state Senate, you know, the Democrats just walked out. They just got up and walked out because they knew it was nonsense. I mean, it's insane that now this has become my opponent said that he's making this part of his platform. On day 1, he's in office, he's going to end critical race theory. And I was like, that's not even taught in K through 12 to begin with. So let's start with that. Secondly, who the hell do you think you are? You're going to be the Attorney General, and you're going to suddenly, wave a magic wand. But my point is, these are not people who are vested into our schools. We really need to. We finally have in 2022, because of the good work that a lot of people did in this state, passing something called Proposal 2 in 2018, Voters Not Politicians. We finally have better, more competitive maps. We can finally flip the state Senate, flip the state House, and I'm telling you, when we have the right people, and it's been a very long time, last time that we had a Democratic governor and Democratic majorities in the House and Senate, Sam, what year was that, you think?
Ask former Representative Mary Waters.
Mary, what year was that? What's it been, like 30 years?
Well, for the House, we took back the House in 2006, so they were able to start in 2007, and the majority.
But the Senate's been like 50 years or something, right?
I mean, it's been so long.
Yeah.
The Senate.
Right. So my point is this: we finally have an opportunity to have, people who actually care about our public schools and actually care about our students, and who are willing to appropriately fund them. And we haven't had that for a very, very long time. And so I'd love to be able to say as Attorney General that I can fund the schools properly. But, the governor on her own can't do it either. She can do the best she can. We have all this money that is sitting in our general fund right now that we could be using for things like this. But guess what? It's just sitting there, not being used at all because the Republicans in the legislature don't want to give the governor what looks like a win. They don't want to make her look good by actually appropriating the money in a way that's actually going to help anybody.
And Madam Attorney General, the question the gentleman is asking is very critical because we're talking about white supremacy legalized through election of Republicans in the state of Michigan. That's why it's so critical that we get out and vote and vote and vote. See, they know the critical race theory isn't being taught. But it's just like when they use Detroit or Inkster as whipping posts, they're stirring up all of those racist sentiments that exist in reactionary white Michigan, and they know that it doesn't matter if the truth exists. As long as they say, Detroit, voter fraud. As long as they say, Inkster, they're teaching critical race theory. The truth doesn't matter. They're appealing to a very evil racism that exists in too many communities in Michigan. The one way we combat that is by taking back the state legislature. We can't do that without record voter turnouts. Next question. The state police are menacing in our community, what can be done through their internal affairs to overhaul the department? Let me just say, I got a call from the Flint mayor the other day. We've been knowing each other literally since he was born almost. And they have a policy there that there are no-knock raids in Flint. But the state police engaged in a no-knock raid recently. And he asked me, well, we were just discussing, kicking around. I said that he should speak with the governor and the Michigan Attorney General about the behavior when the state police know that the city of Flint has a rule against no-knock policy. I mean, I don't have to say Breonna Taylor. I don't have to say the names of so many. But what do you do about the state police, which is taking over?
Violence is what you're saying.
Well, that's an understatement. They have state-sanctioned murder. Okay, but
Yeah, so first of all, let me say this. One of the things that I've been trying to do, and first of all, I represent the Michigan State Police, and I know how big the judgments have been against them. And so it's like, it's not doing anybody any favors if the state police are acting out of turn, because it ends up costing the taxpayers a lot of money. And it builds terrible relationships with the communities that they're supposed to be serving. And so that's a problem. Let me, before I get into the answer to that, I just want to tell a little bit of story for a second. And this is one of the problems with Michigan State Police, and it's why, and I know they're working very, very, very hard right now to diversify. It's just they have a reputation problem, so it's really hard for them to get, men and women of color to want to work with them, and that's a problem. But let me just tell you a story. So, as I told y'all, from Wayne County, I was a prosecutor in Wayne County for many years, and I was a defense attorney and did a lot of indigent defense work and a lot of 1983 cases, they're called. Those are civil rights cases, and they were mostly when police departments used excessive force against individuals, usually people of color. I also worked in the first unit at the prosecutor's office, actually created under Mike Duggan, that investigated and sometimes prosecuted cases of police misconduct, whether they were in custody deaths or police shootings. So I'm well aware of some of these issues. But here's what happened that was so weird. So I get into office and, want to work with the state police and Colonel Gasper, who was appointed by the governor, and, do our best to make sure that we had, order maintained in the state, but in a way that was balanced, right? We need our police. I mean, we do. But we want our police, obviously, to act appropriately and to treat all communities equally. But then this thing happened on April 30th of 2020, and it was all of these dudes in their Duck Dynasty, outfits, their tactical gear, with their AR-15 storming the state capitol. And you saw actually pictures. My state senator, Dana Bolhanke, actually took a picture, and it's all of these state senators, they're cowering under their desks while you have these guys, many of whom ended up being charged in the plot to kidnap and assassinate the governor, are hovering over them with their AR-15s and screaming and yelling at them. And here, I just had handled so many cases as both a prosecutor and also as a civil rights attorney and defense attorney, where you'd have, African-American men whose crime was that they were sitting on their porch talking on a cell phone and would end up getting shot by the police because there was a report of shots fired and someone saw them with something in their hand, and then they'd end up dead. But yet, here's a bunch of guys who are literally trying to storm on to the State House floor. They are, in full tactical gear, have, long guns on them, assault weapons, screaming and yelling in the faces of MSP, right in their faces. Guess how many citations were issued? Yeah, how many do you think? We already know. 0. And so I called up Colonel Gasper, because I'm watching it live as it's happening. People, of course, were headed on Facebook Live, and I'm like, screaming and yelling all the MCL violations that I'm seeing, right? I'm like, resisting instructed officer, brandishing, felonious assault, blah, 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 and I'm screaming that out, and I really kind of got told, well, we were able to de-escalate the situation so that nobody was hurt. And I was like, well, wouldn't that be nice if you always did that though?
Yeah.
And not just when it's a bunch of white people that are, all I could say is, if I would have seen that happen, if you'd be in the city of Detroit, right, and you had an African-American man dressed up like that, carrying an AR-15, getting in the cop's face and screaming and yelling and not following instructions or directives, can you imagine that situation for a second? No, but what can we do? All right, so this is something, there's a problem, is what I'm saying. I'm trying to explain that. That's a problem. So here's what of the many things that we talked about. First of all, I think it's so important that every single department in the state get accreditation. And what that means is this. Any municipality can put together a police department, and it's not required that they abide by any specific set of policies or procedures or training. You just have to be MCOLS certified, and MCOLS is the name of the certification board, to get your license to have a gun and a badge and arrest powers. You get trained once, you never have to get retrained the entire time. You can be an officer for 30 years, you get trained one time, and even though best practices will change over time. Can you imagine going to a dentist, by the way, who came out of dental school and then never went to get continuing, education or credits? Would you go to that dentist? I wouldn't go to that dentist. So I have a whole slew of proposals that I came up with following the George Floyd murder, and I went to the Senate and I testified on behalf of them. I got sponsors for them. And let me go through a bunch of what those proposals are. I know you're anxious and it's taking a lot of time and I'm very long-winded. But let me talk about some of them. One is to make sure that MCOLS has the same exact ability to strip an officer of their license that every other professional board in Michigan has. So, for instance, if it's the Board of Medicine, if it's the Attorney Grievance Commission, if it's the Board of Dentistry or Accounting, you can file a complaint and they have the opportunity to independently investigate that complaint and then to impose discipline on the licensee and say you're getting reprimanded or you got to pay fines, and then it escalates, and next time you get suspended, the next time you get revoked. We don't have anything like that with police officers. The only way you can have your license stripped of you is if you get charged and convicted of either a felony or a very high severity misdemeanor, or if you leave one department and don't go to another department for 2 years. That's it. You can't, if you have the same police officer, let's say, that gets accused of excessive use of force, you can have 10 judgments against that same officer, each one for $1 million. Ain't nothing you can do about it. Even if they fire him and say, this is too much money you're costing us, that cop's like, all right, I'm just going to go over to this department. And you know what? He's going to get hired. And you know why? Because we have a shortage of police officers, and they'll take anybody. And I've seen officers that got fired from 4, 5, 6 different departments, and they still have a license, and they still have the opportunity to have a gun and a badge. And we can't do that anymore in Michigan. So I've proposed this multiple times. I testified on behalf of it. I can't get the Senate or the House to do anything because the Republicans don't want to pass it. And I had 8 reforms. That was just one of them. But aren't you the top officer? No, but it has to pass. It has to understand. Right. It's got to go through the legislature. And
hey, they can't hear what you. Did you ask something?
Well, the one thing that she said that we all know that we didn't have to ask the question, had it been black people getting near the Capitol, you could have been down at Kennedy and they would have shot from there for you. But my question is, we must have laws in place where no one, I don't want anyone shot. No one should be taken down. There's no way you should die for a traffic stop. Bottom line.
So here's the thing about accreditation, and let me just talk about this. As it would relate,
Yes.
I'll get it wrapped up. As it relates to the shooting in Grand Rapids, Patrick Lelia, this accreditation, this program that I'm going all around the state promoting, trying to get the governor to agree to appropriate money to every department in the state of Michigan who will be accredited. There's a foot chase policy that would have, if the officers in Grand Rapids had been properly trained on foot shakes, you know what would happen? When Patrick ran away, they would have just stayed there, they would have taken his car, and they would say, we'll catch up with you later.
Yeah.
And that would have been it.
Like,
but they're not, the
you
Grand
need a law
Rapids
for
is
conversation?
not accredited. And let me can I make one more comment on Grand Rapids, because I know we all want to hear a little bit about this. I am working with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. I don't have the authority in Michigan as Attorney General to do what's called pattern or practice investigations into police departments or school districts. So I've been trying to get the legislature to give me that authority, but as it stands right now, only the federal government, only the Department of Justice, and the Michigan Department of Civil Rights has that authority. So when I first got into office in 2019, I knew there was a problem with Grand Rapids PD. And I said, what do you have? Can we work with you to help you file a complaint against the department so we can get a consent decree, much like they did with the Detroit Police Department back many years ago, so we can force them to get the training that they need to have so they can be properly respecting the constitutional rights of their citizens. And unfortunately, we've had 4 directors of the Department of Civil Rights in the 3.5 years that I've been there. We finally said, give us everything you have, every complaint that's ever been filed against them, give it to my office and we'll go through it and we'll investigate it. And we are. And we are.
All right, everybody, because, all right, so there's a couple of questions. We're going to have to,
Sorry, I know
yeah, you got some litigation.
Yeah.
We're going to try and get through this here real quick.
We got some questions from the internet.
We got those. I got to give this sister a chance. She can wait patient. And I got a couple other ones. So we're going to get to a lightning round thing for you here in a minute.
Can you hold it for me?
Great. Well, I think we kind of went over some of that, but these are questions that come
Sir,
social media.
Director, I got to let her get this question. She's been waiting 15 minutes.
Go on.
Greetings, Attorney General Nessel. My name is Nessel Scott. I've been trying desperately to get assistance for me and my children as far as women's rights and children's rights. I served on the HUD Board of Commissioners back in January 2020, and another tenant. This was a case I'm a tenant also of public housing, but they select one resident to advocate and be the spokesperson for other tenants as well. And we work in connection with other councils and boards. But this was a case where another tenant stole my tenant file out of a federal government HUD building. How does one do that and then come to a public meeting in front of HUD officials, including me on that panel? And I had to keep my composure and expose my pertinent household information in front of everyone without, anyone, intercepting and saying, you don't supposed to have that. That is HUD's property. And this man is still free. I mean, he gave a copy to the mayor, the current mayor, as well as the Board of Commissioners, the executive director, and the HUD attorney. They also reported it to HUD within 24 hours. HUD said, unfortunately, it falls back into the mayor's hand and the Board of Commissioners and the executive director, because HUD only cuts the checks. They no longer deal with the management. So I'm trying desperately to be heard. I mean, where are the rights for me and my children as far as residents' rights and civil rights? I've been trying to reach, it's the new Secretary of HUD, Marcia Fudd. I filled out reports. I went to every line of command.
Let me ask you, under state law, you're talking about federal law right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But under state law, if a person is to remove somebody's personal file that is with the state of Michigan in any agency and utilizes it for something like that, that actually is an unlawful act. Now, federally, to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. I can't imagine that that's legal to do, but did you report it to the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Right. Under stalking, domestic violence, and harassment, and a hate crime. But they said it's nothing that they can do because it happened 2 years ago. Excuse me. When it happened, I contacted you within 24 hours. I filled out police reports. I went through every line of command, even your office. And your administration did get back with me and referred me to the Bar Association. The Bar Association referred me to Free Legal Aid. Free Legal Aid said they don't deal with high-profile civil cases, that I would have to take my own money and try to get a lawyer, which I tried to with my, my unemployment.
There's a very specific set of circumstances that probably doesn't apply to everybody. Can we talk afterwards?
Sure.
And we can try to figure out what.
Sure. Thank you.
Assist you.
Thank you.
But I will say that, in situations when we have seen it where, you have a state employee who takes private information that's with a state agency and shares it with others, that, it is illegal. It is illegal. We do take action on this a lot.
Thank you.
So, you got there's some questions.
So these are all internet questions?
There's one gentleman that. You go ahead. You just stand up. Go ahead and just stand up.
Thank you. Send me an email. Okay, yep. Thank you.
I'm coming from the city of Flint. And what I want to know is,
Email me. Okay, thank you so much. Ms. Bush. Thank you.
The police department, you mentioned the Michigan State Police before. I have a video where the Michigan State Police, they altered the video. They bound me over for trial on an alter, so some evidence that's been fabricated. This happened January 2nd, 2019. They've been postponing it ever since. They postponed it over 30 times. On April 2nd, 2 days before my birthday, the same arresting officer came to my house, parked around the corner from my house. As I was coming home, I'm coming down my street, and I see 2 flashlights walk in between my house. As I get down further, I see the Michigan State Police parked around the corner with all the lights out and both doors open. They knocked on my bedroom window. And I've been exposed to my court-appointed attorney. I told her that the dash cam video was altered. It took him about 7-8 months before I heard back from her.
Okay, so let me say this. First of all, it's important, obviously, that we lift up the good work of police officers when they're doing good work, but it's also important that we hold them accountable when they're violating people's rights. I think we can all agree with that, right? So what we started doing in our department, what I used to see a lot when I was doing defense work, I did see tapes that clearly had weird edits that were inexplicable, right? I mean, I did. And then what would happen is, the same thing would happen. I'd go and I'd ask for discovery in the case, I'd get that tape, and I'd bring it to the court, and then the case might get dismissed, but then the next day that police officer's still out there doing the same thing. Like, it's great that your case was dismissed after you got arrested, after you spent time in jail, after you had to come up with money for bond, after you had to go to court 30 times. But, what happens when that occurs? And that's why I think this Empool situation is so important. But at my department, we have started to take on, when we do have those officers that are engaging in that kind of behavior, here are some of the kinds of cases that we've charged. We charged a guy in Jackson who falsified a search warrant and basically said he had information to get into a safe that he broke open, but really he first broke open the safe, saw what was inside, and then came up with a search warrant as to why he could get in the safe. We had another case where a police officer lied about the circumstances of pulling somebody over and said that somebody was speeding, and clearly they weren't speeding, and it was on the dash cam, and we charged them with that. And why do I do that? Because to me, like I said, We have to ensure that we are supporting our police officers when they are protecting our lives and doing a good job for us, but we can't have them lying on us, right? That's not helpful, and it creates mistrust in the community. Well, so what I'm saying is those cases, you can report them to my department, and we do take action. And even though we represent Michigan State Police, what we do in those instances is we build something called the conflict wall, and our state operations division that represents them is precluded from working with our criminal division that investigates that. So that's an answer to your question, you can report it.
So the first internet question is, what do you have in place for police misconduct? So you just answered that. The second question is, what do you have in place for gun violence and our youth?
Right, so firstly, this can't be a rapid, you just said it. Oh, try my hardest, God. All right. So firstly, I've been going all around the state of Michigan trying to see how grant funding has been used to to ensure safety for our kids at school. But what I've come to understand is we can put all the locks on the doors that we want. We can have the best surveillance systems in the world. We can have like great walkie-talkies where the police have contact at the same time with the school administrators. But it doesn't mean anything if we don't get guns off the street. It doesn't mean anything. And so there are a number of different things that I have supported. I've been going after ghost guns, trying to get ghost guns off the street. Ghost guns, you might know, are these guns that they're only for people who can't legally purchase guns. You make it at home on a 3D printer. And these are guns they don't have serial numbers that you can trace. They're made out of plastics that go through metal detectors. They're incredibly dangerous, and they're killing people all over the state of Michigan. I want those banned. I'm trying to get them banned. But in addition to that, I support all kinds of other things. Safe and secure storage. Like what? I mean, can you imagine that the Republicans are fighting against trying a law that's been proposed several times that just says that if you have firearms in your house, you have to keep them safe from children? They don't want that to be illegal. I'm supporting red flag laws so that when you know somebody who has firearms that like they're posting stuff on the internet about killing people or killing themselves, shouldn't you be able to go to a court of law and petition the court to take away their firearms temporarily while they get a mental evaluation? We don't have a law like that. What about the fact that you can buy as much ammo as you want at one time? Not just as many guns as you want, but as much ammo. Like, what are you doing purchasing 2,500 rounds of ammunition all at one time? There are a million things that we could do. Right. Universal background checks. I could go on and on and on. The problem is this, I'm not in the legislature. I can't enforce laws that don't exist. I need the legislature and the governor to give me these laws, and I will enforce them.
Why should we trust you, and how will you gain our trust?
Well, I guess my honest question is, why don't you trust me? I mean, can I talk about one other thing I wasn't even asked about? I just want you to know this. What has always driven me crazy is the fact that you have some, attractive blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl that goes missing, and suddenly you have like a task force, an international task force convened to find that woman and to see who caused her death if you find her body. But we have black men and women all over the state of Michigan who went missing or whose bodies were found under suspicious circumstances, and nothing was done to ever close that case. So I created a cold case homicide unit that we are concentrating just on people of color whose cases have never been solved, and we've been solving them. We charged the case, 40-year-old case of a little African-American girl, 9 months old, and her case would have never been solved. Well, we found out who the killer was and we charged him, and he's got a case that's pending right now, a first-degree murder. We have a whole slew of African-American men in Benton Harbor that their bodies turned up in the St. Joseph's River. Nobody ever did anything to find out who killed them. We have. And we started solving those cases. We solved a 30-year-old mystery of what happened to this man who it was said that he drowned. It was an accidental drowning. No, it wasn't. It was a hate crime. He was murdered. And we solved it. After 30 years, we solved it. It was a subject matter of like all these novels and everything. We are doing our best to create create equal justice for everybody. That gentleman at the Northland Mall, right, that was sat on and asphyxiated by all those mall cops. And Jessica Cooper in Oakland County never charged him. I came back years later, and I did. They all got charged with manslaughter. All of them did. So I am trying my hardest to have this be an office that provides justice equally to all people, no matter your income, no matter your geography, no matter your race, religion, ethnicity, what have you. So we are doing our best to try to do that. And so when you say, why should we trust you? I always just say, look at the work that we've done in that department. And then I guess ask, why wouldn't you trust me?
I trust you.
Thank you. I thought all these people came for me, and then I saw the cake in the background. And I was like, maybe this isn't, maybe it's just for the free cake. But I still appreciate y'all coming out to hear me talk to you.